Here we go.
Oh,
Oh, are
shoot.
we live? I think we're live. Man, it's been a while, guys. Let's
Woo!
dance it in. It's Wednesday night, the middle of the week. If you can't dance on a Wednesday, when can you dance? I am so excited. Look at Natalia. She's getting in there, man. She picked this song. I am excited to have a guest. Guys, welcome. So happy to have everyone here today. If you are watching on the replay, definitely hashtag replay. If you're live, give me a thumbs up, let me know you're here. Drop a message in the comments. Guys, I know it's been a while since I've gone live. I think it was like the day after my birthday last week. But I am excited, guys. I've been busy in a good way. And I'm really excited to be here with Natalia tonight. She's going to share so much with you guys. Her and I were just talking. I said, listen, let's start this thing because you and I are going off on things I want
Yeah,
people to
right?
hearing. So, and I told her a little bit about the start down. We're talking about what happens after you get to work. And I think she focuses so much on that and motivating people. And she's sharing her experiences. She's sharing her coaching that she's actually doing with her clients, which we're going to talk about coaching and what all that means now as a buzzword and all that fun stuff. So, but like I always say, no one introduces themselves better than you do. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you. Let you do a quick introduction, everybody, while everyone's getting on and giving their likes and putting their questions in the comment section.
Awesome. Cool. Hi, everybody. For those of you tuning in, I can't see you guys on my end, but thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Michael, for having me on. So, my name is Natalia Sanchez, and I am a business success strategist, you could say, and a leadership development coach. Now, that is just a lot of words for basically saying that I help people get from where they are to where they want to go, and that's just my whole job is to help people identify the path and then the way to get through to it.
I love that. I love that. And you and I were talking a little bit before, and I really believe, finding the path for so many people now is so interesting, right? And I
Yeah.
think live in social media and entrepreneurship and all the communities, the Firewood Style group I'm in, the Vayner Nation group, a lot of these groups that I'm in, as well as the group I'm in with you see everybody talking about, all right, I want to do something, right? And I
Right.
think for a lot of people, it's hard for them to figure out that something, right? For me,
Yeah.
it's been, are you a jack of all trades, master of none? And what's your niche, right? Like, how did you, and I know you talked about this before, how did you find this to be your niche? Like, how did you know this was what you were supposed to do?
Yeah. So, I'm so glad you asked that because what's been coming to me. I would say there's two specific things for that. The first thing is what's been coming to me lately is this concept of iterations. I think a lot of times we put so much pressure on ourselves, and starting at a very young age, like as soon as we get into college, there's this expectation that we're supposed to be able to identify the one thing that we're supposed to be committed to for the rest of our lives, right? And when you think about that, like when you're starting college, if you're starting at 19, or even now people are starting a little bit later because they're getting, the picture, right? That it's like kind of kind of early to try and put all this pressure, right? But if you're graduating around, 21, 22, I mean, even if it's 23, 24, like you're signing up to commit yourself essentially for the next 40 plus years of your life, right? And I think there's so much pressure in there, and there's so much like just sort of being stuck in one thing, and there's no room, at least in this current understanding of it, to explore oneself. And so I think for myself, what I like to do and help other people understand is that it's okay to have these sort of iterations of yourself and give yourself permission to like play around with different ideas and also evolve past the thing that you're currently doing. So I think that's where people get stuck the most, is that they're bored or they're not fulfilled in their current work, and it's they feel stuck there because they feel like they have to continue doing that one thing, and they don't realize that it's like it's okay to move beyond that. The second thing that I would say is I think really what we need to focus on is not so much finding that one specific thing, but finding the way that you like to serve, right? So it's like, what really brings me happiness and fulfillment in the way that I interact with other people, and then let that be the thing. So for myself, I was in management for 3 years, and before then, I was a personal trainer, and so I worked one on one and in groups with people. I loved helping people improve where they were within themselves, right? And then before that, I was a server, and so this was like years and years ago. I was a server, but as a server again, I liked interacting with people. I liked being busy, and I liked again just being part of something where there was movement and progression. And so I had to figure out for myself, where could I find these things that I really enjoy in one particular thing, right?
Yeah.
In terms of a job. And so I think, again, it's really identifying for yourself what it is that you find passion in and enjoyment in, and then kind of finding what works as when you bring it all together. So leadership and management, business strategy coaching and all of that, like, it's just really the thing that has brought all of the things that I enjoy together. And so I was willing, that's another thing, is the willingness to just go there and explore that, to just try it out.
I love that you bring up working in the restaurant. I think everybody should work at a restaurant at some
Yeah.
point in their life, just whether it's as a line cook or a waiter or whatever you may do, just because the speed at which a restaurant runs from, like, you walk in, it's quiet, it's calm, and then all of a sudden there's just like organized chaos, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, I think it's such a great life example for like anything you may want to do, especially entrepreneurship and business and things
Yeah.
like. It's such a great experience, and obviously you're on the West Coast in LA. Everybody's working in a restaurant until they hit the next big thing. But I really think it does help build your character and really help where you're going. I think everybody should work in a restaurant at least at one point of their life.
Yeah, and you know what? It teaches you how to work well under high stress situations. I think that's one thing that I've seen, in my management career, is working with especially younger ones that just don't know, like, they don't know what it means to be under kind of like high intensity pressure. And when you're a server, like, and I also used to be a bartender, so it's like the demand is always on, especially during a rush. And so you learn how to manage yourself during those times. And there's really no other job, I mean, that really teaches you that kind of intensity.
Yep. No, definitely, definitely. And you brought up a good point of I think initially finding what you love to do, and then, like, we just talked about the restaurant and bartending and the chaos, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you and I were talking a little bit about this before, and you shared so much of your journey and one story in particular that stands out to me is the story of when you fell off the cliff. And you've talked about this about you fell. And if you haven't seen Natalia's life, please follow her page, watch her video, like watch every video she's done. Binge watch her this Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah.
'Cause I just love the story of that, and I know there's more behind it. But I was telling you one of the things that I got from it, for me personally, was that, like, you felt this pain, but you were so much in your mind, had so much other stuff going on. You bounced up and were like, "I'm cool, I'm good,"
Yeah.
and like you played through it, but then you had to get vulnerable and get help.
Mhm.
And I know you said you're willing to talk about, so share a little bit about that journey, and even how recently I know that injuries kind of come back and played you with your personal growth. How has that affected you? Because I think for so many people, when we decide to find what we do and find what we love, we hit those hurdles we don't expect, or we hit those
Right.
barriers that we don't expect. How do we push through, and how do we get to that? Share a little bit of that story if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'll start first actually with what happened last Monday. So, last Monday I was in a Bikram yoga class, and for those of you who've done it, you know the struggle. But if you've never done Bikram yoga, it's 90 minutes in 177-degree heat of
Wow.
yoga. Like, and it's not like it's intense yoga. Like, there are very, I would say, kind of advanced positions that you're going in, and so. This particular class, I felt fine going in, and again, there was no pain in my body going in, and 15 minutes into the class, I pull my back, and I felt this really sharp pain. And talk about, like, me just saying, you know what, no, like, I'm going to push through this. I kind of buckled, and I sat down on my mat just for maybe, I gave myself maybe 60 seconds to, like, regain my focus. And I was like, you're going to finish this class. So
Yeah.
I had another 75 minutes in this class, and regardless of whether that was a good thing or not to do, it was that sense of mental resilience of, like, you have to be able to push past this pain in your body, right? Now, obviously it wasn't debilitating. If I was, like, on the floor, I would have, done what I needed to do to get out of the class, but I had a feeling that I could push through. So I did push through. And I finished the class and I came home, and that's when the pain started to get significantly worse. And it occurred to me that the pain that I was experiencing was the exact pain that I had when I fell off this cliff on the night of my 18th birthday. And it brought me back to that moment of really reflecting back on that whole experience and what that was like. And it was really late. It was like kind of, like 1 a.m. in the morning when I was out at the beach with some friends, and I climbed up this rock thinking that that was obviously the right thing to do, the cool thing to do. And I climbed up this rock, right? And it was so dark that you couldn't, for me at least, like you couldn't tell the difference between where the rock ended and the sand began. So
Wow.
I'm up there at the top and I'm thinking, oh, I can just walk right on to more sand, right? And so I just take 2 steps, literally expecting to feel sand under my feet, and I just feel wind gushing up, and I'm like, oh, all right, I guess I'm falling, right? And so, it happened so fast. It's interesting. It happened so fast and so slow at the same time, right? Because time does sort of like in that moment sort of slow down. And I didn't have a lot of time to think outside of just being in shock. And then again, I hit the ground. And so thankfully, when I hit the ground, there was nothing underneath me besides wet sand, and I collapsed forward. And at the time, I was playing softball competitively. So my goal at that time was to, of course, get into a good college to play softball, but then also eventually make it to the Olympics. And so that was like the biggest dream that I had for myself. And so immediately when I fell, all I could think about was like, am I paralyzed? Not because I was so fearful that I wouldn't be able to walk, but because I was so fearful that I wouldn't be able to play, because that was literally the only dream that I had. So at that point, one of my friends who was with me runs over and he's like touching my toes and asking me if I can feel my toes, right? And I'm like, I couldn't feel my toes. And the next thing I was like, I need to see if I can move my legs. And so I wiggle my toes, thankfully. I'm like, okay, so clearly like I'm not paralyzed, but I need to move. So I rolled over, and so there was 3 other, so it was my friend Jason, my friend Diane, and this other guy named Rich. And they're all kind of like just trying to guide me and chat with me about this whole thing, like figure things out, like telling me to call an
Yeah.
ambulance and telling me not to move. And I just completely like tuned them out. And in my mind, I was like, you need to figure out like what you can do right now. So I flipped over. I started crawling. I couldn't feel anything below my hips, so all I could tell was like the weight of my legs moving. And so I'm like, I need to see if I can walk. And so I pushed myself up and pushed up my upper body and brought my knee to my chest. That was the first time I felt pain, and it shot all the way up my spine. Jason and Diane had run over to help me get up, and I like kind of shrugged them off, and I was like, guys, I have to see if I can do this. Like, thank you, but like, let me do this. And so finished getting up, and then I started, putting one foot in front of the other, and it was really painful, but I did it. And then again, they were urging me to call the ambulance, and I refused. And I drove us home. Cause at the time I drove, it was my car, and I drove a stick shift, and nobody else knew how to drive a stick shift. So I had to drive us back
Wow.
home, and I'm like leaning back like a cholo, right, in my seat because I can't sit up straight because of my low back, and so I'm like driving like this, through the mountains of Santa Cruz. But yeah, so that was a fall. I mean,
Wow.
what kicked in for me immediately was again survival. Was like, I need to figure out what I can do for myself right now. Like I can feel my pain later. Like right now, I need to figure out what I need to do next. So
Wow. And what do you think brought that will in you? Is it the athlete? You mentioned playing softball. Is it the athlete in you? Is it just your personality? What was it that gave you the strength? Like, what made you take control of that? Because I think some people, when they get into those situations, right, there's a lot of different ways you can react. You had that fear, and I think when we get fear, some people get very vulnerable. Like, help me, and some
right.
people are like, I got to do it myself. Some people just start saying, why didn't you guys tell me what's going on? Like, what made you take ownership of it? Because I think that's a key point in the story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it was primarily 2 things. Like one, again, I had this dream, and that was the first thing that came to my mind was like, I have a dream, not to sound corny, but I have a dream, and this dream means the world to me. So I need to make sure that I have function in my body in a way that still enables me to pursue this. At least in that moment, that's what I was thinking. And so it was a commitment to that future self, right? That was like, that future self was talking to me like, Natalia, get up, like move your legs, figure it out, right? The second thing I would say is what you learn as an athlete, which is that you cannot say, and I think that there's an overarching I would say, significance to our lives here in this particular thing is that your coaches say that when you injure yourself, you have to actually keep moving, because if you stay still when you're injured, the inflammation happens so quickly that eventually you can't move at all, right? So it's like if you don't move initially in a way that keeps circulating the blood flow, it's actually going to make the pain worse, right? And so your coaches will always say, and again, it depends on the level of injury. I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying like, if you break your leg, you should walk on it, right? But as much as you can actually move your body, you should. And so it's kind of like that concept of walking it off, right? And so that came to my mind when I was laying there, like, you have to move your body, because if you don't move your body, the pain is only going to get worse. And I think that concept in life, it's like when we get stuck, we have to find a way to keep moving,
And I know you talk too. In hindsight, that may not have been the best way to handle the situation. So, you had to do it all over again. But then again, if you would handle it differently, you wouldn't be where you are today.
100%.
So, and I think in life too, right? How do we own our mistakes, right? Like
Yeah.
what do you, and more importantly, I think people do two things, right? Like you accidentally walked off the cliff. I see a lot of people too, like running to walk off the cliff,
Right,
I'm
totally.
not a big mistake
100%.
or running into error, because sometimes I think
Right.
people also feel like, well, I need that arc or I need that
Right.
mistake or
Right.
I'm not going to learn unless I make the mistake. Like, how do you,
Right.
suggest to people, and even based on some of your experiences, balancing that idea of like, when the mistakes happen growing, but then also, trying to avoid those type of errors,
Right.
what's the
Right.
balance there?
Yeah, again, great question, and I think that what it comes down to is like just using this story as a perfect example of that. Like, I think in the moment I handled it as best as probably anybody could have. You know what I mean? But I think what I didn't do well, and I think looking back, what I wish I would have done differently is, again, give myself permission to be vulnerable after the fact. So when I needed help the most, I was able to, in that moment, sort of muster up what I needed, the strength that I needed to make progress, to cover that first, whatever, how many, 12 hours, right? It was after that when I should have spoken to my mom, or when I should have gone to a doctor I went to the ER, but I didn't actually follow up with like a doctor to say, hey, look, I had this incredible injury, help me like recover from it. Right. So it was seeking help after the fact. Now, I think what we do is we try to carry this burden, and that's exactly what I did. Is I carried this burden on my own, and basically, yeah, I did okay, like, but I wasn't able to play softball again, at least not at a competitive level. So had I have sought out help in a way that was appropriate, I think that my outcome would have been better. And so I think that's where it's like, it's good to be strong and resilient, but you can't put that pressure on yourself to do it alone all the time. And I think that's why people, like you said, when you start going in the direction where you're trying to run off the cliff, right? Or you're running in air, like, that's when in our minds we believe the only source of support is our own, or we have to do it by ourselves. But really, like, what's the most important thing is knowing when it's time to reach out for help.
Yep.
So
No, and I think that's a great point, and that's a great really segue into what you do. And I love, I love coaching. I love the idea of coaching. I love the idea of being coached. Mostly because I'm married, I'm coached on a regular basis now.
yeah, right.
But talk about it. My wife's had kids.
That's what marriage is, right?
Yeah. I've seen some interesting things too. But when you look at coaching, and because it's become something I think so it's out there a lot. Like, a lot of people are claiming to do it.
Yeah.
And one of the things people always come to me when they want to start a new business, and I'm sort of guiding them through the idea process and getting all that going, or growing the existing businesses, they always question validity, right? Like, well,
always.
I've never done that before, or how do I get credentialed? How do I become valid in my space? You talked about college, like, do I need to go get a master's degree? Do I need to, what do I need to do? And I know you're actually a certified coach. Talk a little bit, and you mentioned before too, the other thing about like if you're going to be a coach, you should have a coach. Talk about that validity in coaching? Why is that so important? And I think, how do people look for a good coach like yourself? Like how do you validate somebody if that's something I want to do? Because it is a relationship.
Yeah. Oh, that is such a good question. How do you validate somebody? Well,
Or more importantly, why was it important for you to become a
be
certified coach,
certified.
and not just throw up a website that says I'm a coach?
Right. Well, and it's also like the type of certification, so I think that, what we're seeing right now in this space of coaching is that there's a lot of people who want to make a difference in other people's lives, but what makes them ineffective as coaches is their inability to really practice what they preach. And I think that what happens right now, the focus tends to be right now is like on coaching, and this there's a lot of momentum happening around personal growth and personal development. But the same goes for any sort of professional career, right? Like lawyers or psychologists or doctors or teachers. I mean, how many bad examples do we have of teachers out there, right? Who show up and maybe are going through the motions, right? And they're not actually showing up for their students. I think that is what is the determining factor, is how are these people showing up, not just for the people that they're serving, but for themselves. Do they seem like they're doing the work and applying the very things that they're trying to teach to themselves in real time, in their daily lives? The other thing is really, I don't want to say a niche, but what is it that you're coaching, right? And I think that people think of coaches as being very like hippie-ish, right? Of like, oh, like, what are you feeling, and like, what are your dreams, and like all of like, it's all very kind of, sometimes it can just seem like lacking structure and lacking direction and lacking strategy. And so I became a certified high performance coach because that, to me, that's what coaching, the essence of coaching should be: performance. The essence of coaching is in taking deliberate action to achieve specific outcomes. And that's really what the thing is like, what actions do you need to take to achieve the outcomes you hope to desire? The person that you work with, the coach that you're working with, should be able to help you do that in a way that's meaningful, not in like, oh, like, let's just like meditate on the things. There's components of this that are, of that side of it, that are good, but it can't just be that. Like, it has to be like, I'm going to show up serious for you. Like, you better be serious too. Like, let's go. We're about to make some progress here. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah, no, and I think 100%. I think a lot of people look at coaching, maybe just like a personal trainer, right? It makes sense that you got to go and you got to do all that, but I think in business, and I think it is important because you need sometimes that voice, right? Like you said, your
Right.
friends were there with you, they were around, your people that you're working on your team with, they're seeing things, but sometimes that third eye, as I call it, on the outside, looking in and just saying, hey, maybe look at that over there in the corner that you're not seeing, changes the perspective of what's going on for a lot of people.
100. Well, okay, that's an incredible point, and I think that that's like, I actually call it like the eagle eye. So
Yeah.
it's this kind of perspective from above, and especially when it comes to business, it's so easy, and this is why I'm so passionate about coaching individuals that work within businesses themselves or own businesses, because what happens is when you're so passionately connected to the work that you're doing, or you're just so inundated with it, you sometimes lose perspective,
Yep.
right? And it's very, again, it's analogous to this idea of being on that cliff, right? Like, my perspective was completely off. I thought that my next step was going to be onto sand, right? And instead, my next step had me falling 30 feet,
Yep.
right? And so I think what happens is that in real life, we lose perspective, and we don't realize that we need somebody else we're so stuck in the perspective that we have, that we don't realize somebody else can actually help us see what we're not seeing. And that's really, I think, where the power in coaching is really at, is like gaining greater perspective, and also seeing your opportunities when you feel like your options are limited.
So with that, then how do I know if I'm, maybe an existing business owner, I've been in business for a while, or I'm just starting out? How do I know if I need a coach, right? Like I know, like come January 1st, I know why I need a coach in working out sometimes,
Yeah, right.
That's very
Yeah.
visible, right? I'm setting goals, I want to lose weight, I want to do these things. So it's like, I got to get a personal trainer to keep me accountable. Like, how do you know in business, if someone's watching this, they're like, well, do I really need that? Like, what would you tell somebody to
Totally.
do as a self-reflection or sort of look at whether or not they need a coach?
Yeah. So I think you've got to ask yourself, one, am I satisfied? Like the first thing is, am I satisfied with where I am? Have I been satisfied? When was the last, everything around this is around satisfaction. When was the last time I really felt satisfied? You know? And so if you're finding yourself not feeling satisfied, maybe that's when you start thinking working with a coach is going to be really helpful. The one that segues right after that, the second thing would be stress and overwhelm. So is this lack of satisfaction and probably expectation, because that's another thing. You can be unsatisfied but have very high expectations, right? And so that tends to be where overwhelm and stress happen.
Yeah.
So when you're feeling like that and you're in such an emotional state, it becomes, again, very hard to see the path ahead. So if you're facing stress, high levels of stress and overwhelm on a regular basis, you might want to consider getting a coach, right? And then the third thing that I would say is, how fast do you really want to get to where you want to go? There's taking the long route, right? That's just got a lot of traffic, right? Or it's taking like that other path that maybe like the back streets, right? Where that there's no lights, right? There's no stop signs, there's no traffic, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's where people get really caught up is like, one, they're like, well, I'm unsatisfied, but I'm not really that unsatisfied, right? Or I'm stressed, but I'm not really that stressed, right? Or I can handle this stress, right? And then, but do I really need somebody to help me get there faster? Like I can get there on my own. And it's like, again, you've got to think about how much time, like money, it comes down to money and time, right? And so time is money. So if you really want to try and do it on your own, you think about the cost of that, and you could probably reduce your costs by half and get there faster if somebody was there working with you.
Yeah. And I think, it is one of those intangible ROIs, if you will. I think a lot of people say, well, I got to look at it as like, well, if I get a coach, am I going to make 30% more, 10% more, all this?
Right.
It's like, and there's a great book, 10% Happier, that I've read before. And it's the idea of, I think, not really what you're going to get, but how much more you're going to perform. And then the success is based on you, not the coach.
Right. 100%.
And like you said, just like in sports, a great coach is only as good as the players on the field,
Right.
And I think that's important to look at, important to consider. So, and I was watching one of your coaching videos, and I'd love for you to kind of coach some people through a little something right now so we could see you showcase your skills, because I think this is something a lot of people struggle with, whether you're a coach, whether you want to be a coach, whether you're anything you're doing in business, right? It's that idea of asking for the sale. And there was a young gentleman, I wish I remember his name.
Cody.
Yeah, I think Cody. So, and he was saying that, I think we get nervous too. It's like, well, am I giving advice, or am I coaching? Or with my product or service, what do I ask? What do I price wise? And you made some great points in there. Talk about people. If there's someone watching this and they're struggling with like, when do I charge somebody? When do I get the point, from like, I guess I would say prospecting or selling them to actually converting them to a client? What advice would you give in that situation?
Oh, well, so personally, I mean, I guess maybe the reason this question confuses me is because for me, it should be right away.
That's a great answer, right? Do we sometimes wait too long? It's like,
Yeah.
let me have 3 sessions with you so I can show you my value. And I think a lot of people feel that sometimes, right? Is that, well, if I'm going to if they need a coach, I have to, convince them. And I think for a lot of new entrepreneurs, there's that fear of, my product's not good enough, I have to give it away
Exactly.
for a period of time.
Yeah.
Is that always necessary? And that's a great answer. Like, I think that's the answer almost, right? Like, don't wait,
Don't wait. Absolutely. So, okay, actually, so sales is one of my favorite topics to coach on. And because the thing is it's all psychological, right? And it actually has more to do with the person selling than the person who's buying, right? Because we always think that it's about convincing the buyer, but really it's about your beliefs about your product that is going to influence the buyer the most. And so you have to show up absolutely ready to stand by and behind what your service is or what your product is, right? And so the confidence that you have in your own work is going to immediately impact the buyer, right? Your client's determination of if they buy. So like, let's put it this way. At the end of a call, I go into every call assuming that I'm going to add so much value to this person's life that they won't hesitate to even want to sign up. That their question will be not me asking them, so what do you think? Do you want to do this, right? And they'll be saying to me, how do I sign up? Where do I sign, right? Like, so it's all about the mindset going in. And I think what happens is we think that we are giving the buyer more time to feel confident about the decision that they're making by extending them these extra things, right? Like, oh, free coaching sessions. And it's like, if you can't nail it in one, right, then chances are it's not going to get any better by the third time. I'm not saying that's always the case, but chances are that, right? And then the other thing too is sometimes it's not a reflection of you if you can't always land it in one. Sometimes it's because the buyer is not committed, right? Yeah. And so again, it's a game of psychology. It's either your psychology that needs to shift or it's their psychology that needs to shift. But you as a provider of services of whatever sort are not responsible for their psychology. So that's another thing too. And that's where we have to be okay getting a no, right? Because we don't want those clients anyway, so.
It takes time at the end of the day, right? Like so many people don't understand that, it's like, well, everyone's not going to be a yes, but if you get to the no as quick as you can, you'll be able to go find the next yes.
Yes.
And sometimes I think but that's a scary thing, I think, for a lot of people in a sales and prospecting aspect, because now the person becomes so tangible to their success and their financial well-being, right?
Right.
You have to decompartmentalize that, and spread it out. And I know that's hard for a lot of entrepreneurs to do, especially if you're trying to keep the lights on or feed the family.
Right.
It's difficult, but you just gotta put that back. So I think that's a great piece of advice. Is just there's a lot of psychology that don't let their no overwhelm you. It's either take it or move on.
Right.
I'm going to be the guy at Costco that keeps doing the loop in the different shirt and hat to get the free sample, right? So I feel guilty after I get one, like, oh, I feel bad I'm not buying it. But then there's people that just keep taking and they're never going to buy it anyway. And they sleep well at night. I don't know how they do that. That's not me.
Right, yeah. Well, and I think that goes to show so much of that everything that leads up to that moment of closing the client or converting them to a client is really the work that you're doing, sort of like that back work that you're doing, right? And you want to make sure that when you're prospecting that you're looking for quality clients or quality prospects, I should say, right? So you're not just going to try and sell your services to anybody. And I actually have done a presentation on this for hiring, for recruiting, but it could be very easily applied to when you're prospecting. You want to have a client or prospect avatar. So you know exactly who you're looking for, and that you're specific about who you want to work with. Because then that makes it, then you know that those are the people that you're going to target, and chances are those people need you too, So you set yourself up for success, in other words, right?
I love it. All right, guys. Well, that's it. That's all the free advice you're getting out of listen, and we're coming up on 30 minutes, and I really want to be respectful of your time. I truly, truly appreciate you taking the time out. Appreciate you sharing with everyone today. So tell everybody, if they want to find you, how do they find you? I'm going to tag in the post here, but what's the best way to get in contact with you, learn more about what you do, see if maybe you'd be a great coach for them?
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, guys. So slide in the DM. No, I'm just.
I love that.
Listen, I want to be, I want to add value. I want to be as open and accessible to you guys as possible. So please feel free to direct message me. I'm very accessible through that. And also too, if you want to add me on Facebook, happy to connect that way. You can also check out my page, which is Natalia Sanchez, small business strategist and leadership development coach. And yeah, those are going to be the three best ways. I'm very active on Facebook, so that'll be the best. Yeah. My website is up there. My website's mgmtelite.com, but I mean, meh. Yeah, I know. What are websites for, right?
And if you're an aspiring coach out there, there's so much on Facebook. Keep sharing great content like this. Appreciate everything you're doing. You taking the time to do a lot of lives out there with people, and the messages you're sharing and the community that you're building. Definitely appreciate it, and I'm learning a lot. So I appreciate that as well. And thanks for dancing with me, man. I always love when the guest wants to dance. So we're gonna go ahead and dance out, guys. But if you're on replay, like I said,
thank you, Michael.
#replay. Make sure you guys share this out. Please reach out to Natalia so that she can hook you guys up and take it to the next level. So we're gonna dance it out to the Killers, the man. You guys have a great Wednesday, right? Enjoy it. If you're on the East Coast, it's almost bedtime, right?
That's right.
Let's go get some In and Out, man. I wish we had In and Out here. So devastated.
I'm like covering my ears, like I'm not listening.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night, man. Appreciate it, everybody. Dancing it out. Oh, a little Tony Robbins dance there. There we go.
All right.